we go. I think that's me. Yeah. Okay. So I know Ignacio said some stuff in Spanish. It sounded lovely, as always. I know Thomas has given a good introduction into Meet Magento, if you don't know it already. And I really like it. Ties into my theme because we are moving forward from Magento 1 into Magento 2. You like how I'm localizing that? My pedigree, I've been around the Magento world for quite a while, as have many of you in here. So, yeah, all that stuff. But I'm really curious to know, and I can't really see very well, I'm very curious to know who you all are. It'll help me tailor my presentation. So if you are already working with Magento 2, raise your hand. That's about how many I thought I would see. Thank you. That's nice. Okay. Are you a Magento 1 merchant, agency, or vendor? Yes. Many more of you. These hands will be completely reversed, by the way, come next year, I hope. Are you a prospective merchant? So are you here and you're brand new to Magento? You're just trying to figure it out. Anyone? Yes, a few of you. Okay, everyone else, like, jump on those people, okay? Let's bring them in. Let's get them into the community. And who's just here because you heard there would be really good food and drinks? The paella last year was brilliant, yes. Right, so if you are, for those of you who are new to the Magento world, I'm just going to switch. I can't keep saying Magento, but you say it however you want. For those of you who are new, you really are coming in at an exciting time. For those of you who are old, who have been around for a while, you are also here at an exciting time because, well, you're part of a pretty successful story. 250,000 stores live, $50 billion US a year, rolling through Magento code. And if that's the case, why change a good thing? So, why do we need Magento 2? Well, we need it because the future keeps rolling forward. And in fact, if you look at it though, it's not really the future. Magento 1, the development began back in 2006. So it's been almost 10 years, right? And no software application is going to last quite that long, except maybe Angry Birds. So we have to do this for technical reasons. We have to do this for consumer reasons, right? The way that we develop, the technologies that we're using to deploy, all of this has changed. The things that we're talking about now, the nuances that we get into as developers, completely different than they were 10 years ago. Same is true for how consumers are shopping. I was having a conversation with one of the sponsors out there, and if you think about it, what we do constantly to our consumers is we put them through tests, right? We test them because we want them to spend, we want them to get what they need. We want them to find what they want, increase their order value, spend more money with us. And when we do that, the ways that we do that, well, it started out, I remember when I first started in this business, A/B testing, right? You show some customers this, you show some customers this, maybe it was a change in description. And then eventually, you find something that works, and you go with that. And then we started doing this with site behaviors. And eventually, what happens is consumers start getting better and better versions of the sites that they're interacting with. And guess what? Like, what was once a test becomes the standard, because then the competitors to the innovators, they start copying them. and it all increases. And we have to evolve our platform to go along with that. Another thing that's worth noting is that it's, since the last time I stood on this stage, it's a completely new Magento, right? We are independent, backed by Primera. We have new products under our own banner. And we have new ways of doing business, and I'll get into that in a moment. So, if you are on Magento 1, I keep having to say this. We actually made this announcement almost a year ago in Australia, which is maybe why you didn't hear it, because it's really far away. Magento 1, the clock is ticking. It is going to be not supported by us anymore as of November of 2018. I know that sounds like a long time, but think about any big project that you've ever worked on. Think about the negotiation phase, finding the vendor, getting things set up, getting prepared. Think about where you're headed. Think about where you're headed as you approach November. You're getting into the holiday season. You're getting into the shopping season. So I would say you practically maybe have a year and a half to transition from Magento 1 to Magento 2. So as I mentioned, commerce keeps changing the way consumers shop, but Magento 1 won't change anymore. We're not changing it. We just released a patch, and that patch actually contained several things that I think were sort of laying around, waiting to be pushed out. And you won't see, I think, any appreciable feature development on M1 for the rest of its lifetime. That also means that we won't be updating the stack for new tech outside of what we absolutely are required to. So you won't see a PHP 7 version of Magento 1. And also, what we expect to happen over time is agencies are going to start to shift their focus on Magento 2, right? So the available pool of work is going to be less and less. I'm sorry, the available pool of workers is going to be less and less. Magento is going to be around. This brings the question into light of when you should upgrade. Who here is thinking about upgrading? Hold them higher? Okay. Who's going to wait it out for another year? That's a fair question. I think I see some of the same hands. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's important to get going quickly because that ramp, we gave a 3-year ramp, it's really starting to run out. We're again on the back half. I can give you the details of the calculation. I'll be happy to talk about it outside. But like I said, about a year and a half is what you've got left. So the factors that you have to think about, and this is a discussion I'm having again and again, and it's a somewhat personal discussion because it's going to change depending on your circumstances. One thing that you must consider is that your theme has to be rebuilt. Right? You may have the world's best working prototype, right, from your Magento 1 store, but that does have to get rebuilt in Magento 2 because we changed the UI architecture a bit. A lot of the stuff that you know if you're a Magento 1 developer ports forward, so things like layout XML, how the view layer works. A lot of that stuff will feel familiar to you, but you'll have to learn a little bit. And for that reason, you have to re-implement the theme. You're also going to have to migrate your custom code. Now, what this means is any code that you have done to customize your site has to be ported forward. Now, I'll mention at the end a migration tool, but Magento 1 code won't work in a Magento 2 instance. Now you can write code today in a way that'll make it easy to port later on, because good development practices are what we're following in Magento 2 for sure, and as long as you're writing nice decoupled code, speaking just to the developers here, that'll help you move things forward. Another thing that influences your timing and perhaps is worth budgeting is the key extensions. So if you have extensions for shipping or payment providers, you need to consider this. Consider whether those extensions exist for Magento 2, and consider any costs of acquiring those. You also need to consider if you're working with an agency or if you are one of the lucky merchants that has Magento developers on staff, you need to consider their readiness to move forward, right? Because it is a slightly different skill set, or an increased skill set to work with Magento 2. Now, the reasons to go, this is the important part. This is the part we have to get right, okay? And I've been having some good conversations, I would say, over the last probably 8 months or so, about the people's journey through this decision of going to Magento 2. So I'm really well rehearsed to talk about the advantages as well as the challenges. The core benefits of Magento 2: increased performance and scalability. There's a great benchmark report about to come out. It was done independently, and you'll see me and probably all of Magento tweeting about it as soon as it's available. I don't want to steal the person's thunder. Many of you in this room will know who it is and know his methodology. So do keep an eye out on that. I want to announce it today. I've actually gotten a preview of it. It looks really good. Another thing to consider is what you have going on right now. So if you're a merchant and you need some new functionality, maybe to integrate with a new provider, do something awesome for your customer base. Maybe add in some order processing workflow or something. And you're looking at building that feature now. I liken it to investing in an old car. I drive a very respectable 1998 Honda CR-V, 200,000 miles, 5-speed. I got it for $200. I love that car because it's paid for. And it just keeps going because it's a Honda. But recently, it started having trouble starting. It began to have trouble starting. And I was going on the road, so I dropped it off with a mechanic. And I was walking through an airport, and I got the phone call. And he said, well, you've got this really massive oil leak. Okay, well, all right. And if he had said that it was going to be $1,000 to fix, guess what? Car goes away. As it turns out, it was only like $100 to fix, so that was great. But I liken it to like the modern day investment in a Magento 1 platform. If you're building out new features there, that is money that you're essentially taking away from your build for Magento 2. So if you're planning a big feature, you really ought to start looking at Magento 2. The third-party marketplace that we have, called Marketplace, is high quality extensions with delivery direct from our servers. So we actually now, as opposed to how it was in Magento Connect, we actually now control much more closely the quality and the quantity of extensions available. In other words, Marketplace is a much better resource, in my opinion, for extensions on the whole than is Magento Connect. And as I mentioned, if you are looking to connect to some of the new vendors, some of the new services coming out, many of the vendors that you'll talk with out here in the hall have connectors for Magento 1, but over time, the newer services are not going to bother to backport their extensions. And as I mentioned, access to development resources. As time goes on and more teams are trained up on Magento 2, this will sort of tip the scales, I think, in terms of who you can find and where. And then finally, one of the big advantages is the feature set. So we've already had a minor release, 2.1, and with that came an integration with Elastic, formerly known as Elasticsearch. We have content staging now, which is a massively cool feature. I don't know, I think maybe Kathleen can give a demo. She's around. And you're going to see our feature differentiation between Magento 1 and Magento 2 continue to increase through subsequent releases. And what that means is the Magento 2 platform is moving forward. New features are coming out. You get those features just as a benefit of being on Magento 2. And all the poor folks stuck on Magento 1 are just sitting there looking in the window at what they're missing. So another case for what has changed already. The UX in the admin is much more simplified. If you're an admin, one of the most common workflows that we found, especially for merchandisers, is to log into the back end, set up a filter, sort, find a group of products that you need to essentially do some reporting on, and look at those details in that grid. And maybe that grid actually needed some custom fields. Maybe you have some attributes about your products which are handy to have in that grid. And in Magento 1, you had to have someone, a programmer, actually customize that stuff. In Magento 2, that workflow works like this. Log into the back end, go to the product page, click on some filter I've already created. We have saved views of product grids, and I've been shocked to hear how regularly this becomes a sort of a massive time saver for the admins out there. And the nice thing is too, another nice thing with the M2 admin is that you can add and remove attributes to that grid just as an admin user, no developers required. Also, it's touchpad friendly. This is another one of those little conversation pieces, at all those Magento cocktail parties. Like, why is it difficult to use the Magento 1 admin on a touchpad? Well, it's because we weren't really using a lot of touchpads back in 2007. We've also simplified some of the workflows. We've beefed up import-export. We also have the ability now, if you're creating a matrix of products. In Magento, if you've got something like a shirt, and small, medium, large, extra large, and colors, right? And you need to represent all those things. You have to create all of those individual items, and you create them sort of piecemeal. In Magento 2, you just simply create the product, tell it which attributes are configurable, and the system will just build out those simple products for you. I mentioned the grid customizations. Also, one thing to note is performance. We do, as part of our acceptance criteria when we're building Magento 2 components, we actually have a story that's added there that requires us to maintain a certain level of efficiency. Which, in other words, a typical story might be, okay, given a certain product size, a number of products, maybe 1 million, how fast a filtered result returns to the grid in the admin view, right? So as a developer, if I'm working on the core, which thankfully they don't let me work on the core, you're all lucky for that. If I'm working on the core, I can't write any code, or I can't submit any code which slows that down, if that makes sense. And this factors into improvements that we've seen, especially for stores with multiple admin users. So on the customer side, we have a base theme. We have a base theme to work with. And of course, it's responsive out of the box. We have also improved performance there. Now, I will say, depending on what you may have heard, especially from a notorious a notoriously bad benchmark, and I mean poorly executed. Magento 2 does require some nice tuning, but we built full-page cache into the core product, right? So what used to be an enterprise feature in Magento 1 is now a core feature in Magento 2. We have add to cart from category, which is something that we didn't have before. And then we've reworked the checkout, completely overhauled the checkout. One of the typical requirements in a Magento 1 installation, I remember because I used to do this work a lot and it was never that much fun, is to customize checkout flow. The reason that was such a common requirement was because what was a really, really cool checkout in 2007, 2008, became a bit aged by the time we retired it. So we reworked the default checkout flow, two-step process. It was built based on user testing, and it tests really well, converts really well. So ideally, you won't have to make customizations there. However, from a developer perspective, the entire thing has been modularized. And then, of course, maintained our pretty high level of SEO features out of the box, and added some new tricks there. And then on the front end, new and exciting ways to customize it if you're a developer. Every single public method has become the consumable event for you, so you can make your integrations nice and terse and not so invasive. Underneath our architecture, so if you're a merchant, you can close your ears for a second. Our architecture, completely decoupled, much higher level, much more professional level of development, I think. Magento 1 really pushed the boundaries of what was possible in a PHP framework back when it came out. But of course, curiously, or not so curiously, time moves on and how developers work moved on, and we now have this case where a modern professional PHP developer looks at Magento 1 and it's like, I don't know what's going on there. Whereas some of those developers, they're looking at Magento 2, I know because I've had conversations like this, and they're like, great, this is a framework I can work with. I can use this for my clients. Built performance in, out of the box, built scalability in, out of the box, and as I mentioned, customizability. So again, as a developer, what this means is that you'll be able to be more effective more quickly than before. That's the story we're telling, right? It's up to you all to let us know if that story is true. There is always a lag when you drop a new version of a application where people are building up knowledge, especially people in an open culture. So my hats are off to the pioneers. But when we did our own internal testing to have our team actually build extensions, what we found was at first about 50% more effort. Next go, about 20% more effort. And from the third go on, less effort to build something in Magento 2 than in Magento 1. This also influences how integrations work. So the extensions that you're getting from the vendors, from the App Store, these all have less surface area contact with the application itself. Which means less collisions, less time fighting to make extensions work together. And then, of course, testability. That is our, I would say when we released Magento 2, this was, in my opinion, the biggest, most important change at the beginning. And that is ships with tests out of the box, ships with the ability for you to write tests for your code as well. So I've said it before, in the Magento 2 world, if you're writing code and you're not covering it with tests, it's incomplete code. Write tests. And then I think one of the things that has been a huge advantage for us I mean, it goes without saying that the community is what really makes Magento tick. And if you are curious if you're a member of the community or not, you're here, so you are. Welcome. And if you want to know how to get involved, my colleague Sherry will be speaking later on in the other room, later this afternoon, on just that topic, how to get involved with the Magento community. But community comes in, especially for an open source project. It breathes life into it. And for us, it also breathes code into it, right? Because we opened up Magento 2 development, put it online on GitHub, allowed developers to contribute both questions and actual code itself. And when Magento 2 was released, it was chock full of code. We've processed, I think, merged 260 pull requests since Magento was put online on GitHub. That's a pretty good number. That means that there is a substantial amount of community-contributed code in our core. And that's good because you guys are out in the trenches doing this work. And, of course, improved extension quality. It goes without saying that one of the advantages of Magento is that there are so many extensions out there because it's really an efficient way to customize your store. You're leveraging someone else's work. You're leveraging someone else's support channel. And with Magento 2, we knew that we had to ante up and offer a great marketplace opportunity, both to merchants and to the vendors. So this means higher quality code that we distribute and that we protect against plagiarism and that we also scan for things like security issues. Now, enterprise. One of the nice things with enterprise is we pack everything related to scalability into the enterprise product, which makes sense. So we have native support for MySQL clustering. You can split databases for order-related transactions. And we have a native asynchronous job queue, right? So you can take those operations that aren't critical in the moment, offload those, and process them asynchronously. That means that your customers are going to get nice, snappy page loads, and then back behind the scenes, they're getting signed up for that newsletter or whatever else you're working on. As I mentioned, we have Elastic out of the box for Magento 2 EE. It's a much, much stronger search facility than Solr. 33 languages out of the box, support for fuzzy matching, much more efficient than MySQL. And I also mentioned content staging. This feature allows you to preview, to make content changes, schedule promotions, and have multiple of these campaigns ready and lined up. And it's all viewable in a nice grid. I think we've got a webinar online, I think on our Vimeo channel, where you can see some of this stuff demoed. This was something that was missing, dramatically missing for Magento 1. Again, you can see how campaigns line up, and they'll even auto-start, so no more waking up at midnight just to turn on a campaign or turn a campaign off. And then we baked in some improvements with PayPal and Braintree as well. And then I would like to mention our cloud. So Magento has gotten in the weather business. We're into clouds. We've got all the clouds. We've got the best clouds. Pretty soon I get to stop making jokes like that, I hope. If you didn't hear the news, then you're either new here or you were living under a rock, because we have built up this cloud platform. There's ample demos online. I'm not going to go into too many details here. Just know that it is your enterprise license. It is your Amazon Web Services. It is your CDN. It is analytics and all of your deployment architecture, all wrapped up in one nice little package with one invoice to pay. Right. Well, if we're going to look at transitioning from M1 to M2, where are we going from here? Here's what we're working on right now. And just for the record, this is as much of a roadmap as I can offer right now. Paul Boisvert and I, Paul is our excellent skydiving head of product. He and I have a conversation scheduled for sometime next month. Yeah, next month, which is soon. And we're going to be talking about roadmap. Because I'm pretty sure I was on this stage last year mentioning roadmap. I've been mentioning roadmap quite regularly over the last couple of years, and it's taken a bit for me to get this thing online. But where we are right now is we're working on developer experience. So now that we have a whole slew of developers around the world working with Magento 2 and we're getting that product feedback, we've had like thousands of interactions, literally thousands of interactions on our code repository online. And we are processing a lot of the issues that have been filed, like we are burning them down. And we're going to burn them down to a nice low level and keep it there. So whatever engineering that requires, that's what we'll do. We're also using this as a time to build in some of our developer experience work, some of the things that we wanted to get done. And this work is taking time. It's already been underway for a month or two, and it'll continue on for probably the next couple of months. So this will be rolled up into 2.2 release at some point in the future. Also, we have a business-to-business module. That's coming out. We haven't stopped work on that. Business-to-business module. Has anyone here built a business-to-business, B2B? You know, it's pretty amazing to me that we built effectively a B2C, a business-to-consumer product, yet we lead the internet retailer top 1,000 for both B2C and B2B, right? And I know what it's like. I've been in those builds. It's really interesting to shoehorn a B2C product into a B2B use. Plenty of people have done it around the world, and what we want to do with our B2B module for Magento 2 EE is to bootstrap that development. So things like approval chains, things like per customer price sheets, et cetera. All of this stuff is going to be handled for you out of the box, right? We're building that. We're supporting that. That means that you can get to the real work that matters, which is making that B2B experience custom for the merchant. And if you're a merchant, it just means lower development overhead. We are also working on some CMS improvements. Not sure the timing on either of those, but they are being worked on. Much more, including we also have our commerce order management product. Now this is our big facility that ties in together. This ties in endless aisle, ties in logistics, warehousing, a lot of features. That is designed for the large enterprises out there. I'm happy to have those discussions with you outside after my talk if you're interested. And finally, tools for migration. We have code conversion, data conversion. We have trained agencies. And we have documentation, which is something that we did not have back in 2007, 2008, if any of you have been around long enough. Our code conversion and data conversion tools, those exist under our GitHub repository, so just github.com/Magento. They do some of the rudimentary work for you. That's our little gift to you to get you going on Magento 2 development. So, migration. You're going to have to move at some point. You can't stay on Magento 1 forever. We'd like to see you in the Magento 2 world, and we're sure that you're going to hear more and more stories about success stories about Magento 2 transitions over time. That's my contact info. I'll be around today, anxiously awaiting paella, etc. So do enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.